Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. I'm joined today for a special interview with Calgary mayoral candidate Jeff Davison. Many of you will recall that he was a candidate in the last election, scored a very respectable third place. But as you all know, we ended up with current mayor Jyoti Gondek. There are a lot of candidates on the ballot this year that do seem to have a plausible chance of winning. It's a wide open field with no clear front runners yet emerged in any kind of head-to-head. So I'm pleased today to be joined by Mr. Davison. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I remember, I think the first time we actually met was when we did an editorial board interview with you 4 years ago. Yeah. We had a little rinky-dink office in the same building, just one floor upstairs. We had just one room with furniture from the 1970s. But I was very proud of our up-and-coming little office.
It's amazing to see the growth. Truly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we try to watch the municipal beat. Modern media industry being what it is, there just isn't the resources to have big city hall crews going. But, we've, even though it's not it doesn't make the most economic sense, we've tried to have someone at City Hall. We've had Mike Thomas, I know you've talked to before. Corey Morgan we've had on, the mayoral race and the council races pretty well. So I appreciate you taking your time, because it's not as clear cut as the last election. Last election, you had a very respectable third place showing, but in the end, it had come down to a two-way race between Jyoti Gondek, Jeremy Farkas. Jeremy Farkas, that time was, I think, seen as a more robustly conservative candidate than he is now.
Yep.
We go back a long ways.
Yep.
I'm not going to badmouth Jeremy, but his, I kind of rib him that, after he lost, he went on this Forrest Gump run, and he came back. He came back different.
Sure.
And I think he came by it honestly. I don't think it was for show. I think he had a change of heart. But he's no longer kind of the clear, more stridently conservative candidate than he was last time. Last time, I think he received maybe the more moderate conservative candidate. But now, I guess, with the reorientation of Farkas maybe leftwards, you arguably are the more conservative candidate in the race. And Sonia Sharp, in a presentation, seems to at least be kind of going for the same thing, that the two of you are the more conservative of the two candidates. So I guess this is the big question. A lot of people are wrestling with conservatives or non-socialists in Calgary. Even in our newsroom, it's totally mixed. A lot of people just don't know who they're voting for.
Yeah.
Why should more conservative or non-socialist Calgarians vote for you as opposed to Sonia Sharp or Jeremy Farkas?
Yeah, and to be clear, the undecideds are huge in this election. It's a very different race, and I think to the point of policy last time versus now, where are we? I think the world has changed. I don't think in 4 years the city's gotten better. I think we have seen public safety erode to such a point where people don't feel safe in the downtown, and now we're seeing crime eroded out into the communities. I think we are now at a point where affordability has eroded so far that people just say, why won't the city do its job to freeze taxes? And I'm the only candidate saying I'm listening, and I will. I think when the vast majority of people feel like the blanket rezoning, for instance, was just another example of City Hall not listening, that's the standout point here, right? I'm putting Calgarians back in the driver's seat, and our campaign is very simple. Put out a vision of being an affordable, safe place of opportunity for everybody. That's what Calgary's always been about. It's the place where people can succeed. And it didn't matter where you came from or what you planned on doing. You could be successful because our city supported you. And 4 years ago, I think I'd kind of moved on with my life. I moved into healthcare. I thought, you know what, it's going to be a long while before we see another opportunity like this. And from the get-go, it was a climate emergency and canceling an arena deal and a bag bylaw and a blanket rezoning and just about everything you could imagine that did one thing.
You are committed to letting us have bags and straws again, right?
I can tell you at the hospital, we've never gotten rid of plastic straws because nothing says, gross than a patient who has to deal with a paper straw that has been in there.
4 straws with me when I go somewhere. You take 4 because there's anything else.
But at the end of the day, I think where council has failed, and I think what makes me stand out is that people have lost trust in city council. They no longer trust that they're putting them first, and people are tired of giving their opinions and not being heard.
I mean, for a big majority of Calgarians, there's one thing they agree on: they don't want Gondek.
Yep.
We probably don't need to rehash the reasons why it's a mile long, but who replaces her is the big question, and also, not so-called splitting the vote so that she kind of comes up the middle. I've always been a little hesitant of those who talk about splitting the vote as if one party or one candidate has some kind of entitlement to your vote,
right?
And that you're somehow betraying them by voting for, what you might see as more principled, like Greens on the left, or, like a Reform, or something more right-wing on the other side. But there's something to it, just not as much as those who say that over and over would think. So I think a lot of people don't want to split the vote in a way that would allow Gondek to win. The polling has been all over the map and inconsistent. Janet Brown, a pretty trustworthy, incredible pollster, was out last night, this morning. As you said, huge undecided. Normally, you would never see an undecided vote as big as it is this close to election day. You might see that a few months out before people are thinking about it. I live out the county. Thankfully, my choice is not as hard. I don't get the vote. So I'm grateful I don't get the vote in this, because it's tough.
Right.
But, they don't want to split the vote. Janet Brown's poll had Farkas as the leading non-Gondek candidate, followed by Sharp and yourself. All three still competitive on the map. They're not in like Thiessen territory,
right?
But I think Thiessen voters are probably all going to be faced with, well, our candidate's not going to win. Do we then just get behind Gondek?
Correct.
So among people who are thinking, among the three of you, or even let's just even say you and Sharp, there are differences, but I'd say the differences between you are less pronounced than among the other candidates.
Yeah.
So, if we just take it as granted that policy-wise are very similar, why should they vote for you over her? If at least in that poll, she's got an edge on you, has a better chance. I've seen other ones that don't show that.
That's right.
But Janet Brown's generally pretty credible.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, Janet's poll took place before the first major debate. And so I think people, when you have such a large undecided population, I think the debates are incredibly important. And I think that debate has now shifted those numbers.
I think some people might not know what you're talking about. We're going to play that clip. There's a clip you're talking about of a debate that took place recently where Sonia Sharp had a bit of a moment.
Right.
Mayor, I'm not running on a personal or ideological agenda. I'm running on a to-do list. A list I've compiled over the last 4 years with thousands of conversations with Calgarians. 3 of those things are repeal blanket rezoning, 500 new police officers, downtown safety, and bring administration to heel. So if you want a safe, affordable city... I'm sorry, is that rude?
That's rude.
That's rude,
that was
Jeff
not
Davison
called for.
team.
Yeah.
That's really rude. Can I start my last statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we come out of that and you start to think about, okay, what's the differentiator? I mean, I'm not rolling back the blanket rezoning and I'm not part of the vote split. I entered this election a year ago.
You're not rolling back blanket rezoning?
No, I am.
Oh.
So she has since rolled back her opinion on the blanket rezoning and has created some language that shows that her opinion on it is very wishy-washy. I've never been undecided on this. The blanket rezoning will be rolled back day one. We are committed to that, as we are committed to public safety changes. Those are the 2 biggest things we're hearing in this election. When it comes down to a vote splitting perspective, I think, again, I entered this race first. I entered this race day one. I put our policy out. We talked about how we're going to do more to clean up our streets. We talked about how we will roll back the blanket rezoning. And I'm the only candidate today still talking about a tax freeze, a 4-year tax freeze, because we can't continue to erode our tax base, right? We have to do more and budget more appropriately to the income levels that we have. And so those are the things that I think ultimately will stand out. I think there was a lot of conversation about the last election where people said, you and Farkas split the votes and we ended up with Gondek. But to be clear, Farkas and I together did not beat her.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a misconception that I think has followed us into this election.
I think in Alberta, Conservatives also have PTSD from 2015, which
100%.
I also don't think was, strictly speaking, vote split. There was a lot of other issues.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah.
So the issues aside, they're very different right now. I think what people are looking for is somebody who can lead us potentially through the next 10 years. Who's somebody who can champion our city? Who's somebody who can bring opportunity? And who's somebody who can get the things done that Calgarians are asking, which includes cleaning up our streets and rolling back the blanket rezoning. And I have been unequivocal on those things.
Okay, I want to come back to the same question. I know it's a tough question, but I think it's fair that, there are some policy differences between you. You're saying on blanket rezoning, but otherwise pretty close. In another reality, I could see you guys running on the same slate. One is maybe running an award for council and one running for mayor, but I could see you guys being on the same slate. You're in the same universe.
Sure.
So in the absence of policy, is there a strategic reason to vote for you if your goal is to stop Gondak?
Yeah, because I haven't been part of this mess for 4 years. I think, we've had an example of the two-party system already for 4 years. You've got the Yes Mayor party and you've got the anti-anything party. Neither one of them have been able to get anything done to the positive for Calgarians. And that's why I'm calling for a clean sweep. I don't think any of these people should be reelected. I frankly don't think any of them deserve a promotion.
None of the current councillors?
Absolutely not, because they haven't gotten anything done. And to simply stand up and say, well, when I'm elected mayor, I'm going to change that. Well, all due respect, you've had 4 years to get the job done and you failed. You failed to build public safety measures in place, and you've talked about it, but you haven't done anything about it. You failed to fix the water permanently. You failed to fix our streets. You failed to meet affordability measures. You failed to develop our city in a way that led with community in mind. This council has just failed, period, full stop. Why would we ever risk the next 10 years with one of them again?
I think one of the issues that would probably be a hang up for some conservative-leaning Calgarians to vote for you would be from 4 years ago.
Sure.
It was a different map. Farkas was perceived as being the most hardcore of the Conservatives. I don't think he would agree with the characterization the way he's running today.
Sure.
So I think that's fair. But, we were in COVID and everything
was all over the map.
Like everything became COVID. It saturated into every little piece of our politics and society. And mask mandates had been a huge issue right then. That was kind of engineered by outgoing Mayor Nenshi to have a big vote on masks and more lockdowns. And, Gondak had been with the Nenshi side. Farkas had voted against.
Sure.
It may have hurt him in the end, voting that way, but I thought it was the right way to vote. But I think, you had been not quite as stridently against, some of the mask mandates and whatnot. And I know some conservative-leaning Calgarians remember that.
Sure.
Is there anything you would say to kind of address, we're not in COVID, it's not an issue today.
Look,
but
it's a fair question, right?
It was a test of everyone's politics and values.
Absolutely.
What would you say today to Calgarians who didn't vote for you then because of, where you voted on mask mandates, etc. Even though it's not an issue today, what would you say to them to try and earn their vote when they didn't vote for you last time?
Well, number one, I spent 4 years working in healthcare and would have a very different opinion of things today. I mean, when we had international media pushing a narrative, when we had challenges going on, as city council, it was hard. And whether you were for or against mandates or, trying to stand up for one thing or the other, we were all kind of living in fear. Right? We were living in real time. We really didn't understand what was happening. 4 years later, 5 years later, really, we have a different perspective on it. Working in a hospital now, I can tell you we've seen more cases of COVID in the last few years than we ever did during the pandemic. Hasn't made the news, and we've dealt with it. So we know how to deal with these things now using different measures. And I think that's important. What we learned from it and what we take forward and what we would do the next time would apply a very different value set to how we get through it.
So would it be correct to characterize what you're saying as you regret the way you had voted at that time, but you voted that way?
Well, look,
because
I don't think it's about regret, right? Because I think it was about living in real time with the information supplied, and that was hard. Right?
Allow me to rephrase. Would you change how you voted then if you knew what you know now?
If we had all of the information, yeah, probably. Because I think we do know more now, and frankly, we've lived through more now. Right? Like, again, we've seen many cases and many times in the hospitals when we have been overrun with COVID cases since the pandemic had happened. We managed it, right? We have different protocols in place now. We have different understanding of how disease is transmitted. There's lots of different things that we would do because we have the advantage of having that information now. So I would absolutely do things differently.
Okay. You already touched on some of these things, but I want to get a bit more into them.
Sure.
Crime and drugs. It's kind of a perennial in the top 5-7 issues for people.
Yeah.
But I think it shot right into the top 1, 2, or 3 for most now. It's, it's madness. I just spent the better part of a week down in DC, which has got a reputation as not the safest place. Now, I was in a safer area of DC. I wasn't in some of the rundown, more notorious areas, but now they brought in the National Guard, so they took a cannon to, I don't say it was to shoot a mosquito, but they took a cannon to whatever they were shooting.
Yes.
I couldn't believe how safe the place was.
Yeah. That's what a lot of people have said.
I didn't see a single meth addict on the streets. I saw only one old-fashioned drunk. I forgot about old-fashioned drunks. The guy was just sitting there drinking hooch and kind of muttering to himself.
Down on his luck, and that was about it.
Yeah, he was just sipping some hooch and making a little racket, but it was not what I see right behind our office in the alley here every single day.
Yeah.
I don't even need to describe it. It's a horror.
It's madness.
And it's a horror show to the souls that are afflicted by it, and it's a horror show to anyone else who just wants to live and work around here. Nothing's worked so far. I'm sure more police is part of the solution. But what is it that you would do to crack down on this beyond just some more cops out there? Because I think everyone promises that.
Everybody understands we need more cops, but that's only part of the problem, right? And let's remember, this is an incredibly complex problem, so there isn't a simple solution. What we've actually
the army seemed to work.
Short of that,
short of the army, what would you do?
Well, I mean, to me, I think, look, Calgary's full. We're a city full of bright minds, right? We're an entrepreneurial city. We know how to get things done. To me, it's about not about being the smartest people in the room and not about doing the job ourselves as government, but how do we gather the right people to the table to help solve the problem? And so when you think about it, it's bringing the feds in to talk about bail reform and how do we pilot a program here on bail reform so that we're not arresting people day one and seeing them back on the street 2 days later, which, by the way, is a huge problem and why we have 20% of our police officers off right now, right? So it's getting them back to work as well as potentially looking at the additional measures of new officers, right? It's looking at it from a provincial standpoint and how do we deal with mental health and addiction? That is 99% of the problem right now, right? We've got to figure out how we deal with that problem, how we get people off the street.
Are you supportive of the idea of, I forget what the term was used, but mandatory treatment?
Yeah, I am, because I think what we're doing isn't working, right? And we've got to take some chances here on how we can actually get people off the streets. And so it's not going to work for everybody, but where and when we do need to apply, like there's no simple one thing we can do here. But what we've got to agree to is what we're doing isn't working. And the fact is, we're probably going to make some future mistakes, right? We're going to bring in all of the agencies with the wraparound care. We're going to bring in policing agencies. We're going to bring in multiple levels of government. We will make some mistakes, but we're going to have to be able to say that didn't work, pivot. Let's keep moving, because doing nothing is not an option. And, the one thing I hear from people is when seniors don't feel safe to walk downtown, and parents like myself won't send our teenagers on C trains, when our own transit officers are being assaulted on the job, when police are saying we're fed up, we don't have the resources to get the job done, when frontline workers such as firefighters and EMS are doing the job 5 years ago they never thought they'd be doing, this is a problem. And it's a problem we have to address quickly.
That leads me to a question I wasn't expecting to ask, but you were talking about transit officers being assaulted. There was a case I think it was just a few weeks ago or so, a month at most, where a transit officer was assaulted. And Calgary police issued a statement saying, make yourself a good witness, but do not get involved. I'm paraphrasing, but they said, do not, even if you see someone being assaulted, don't get involved to help them. Just be a witness.
Right.
And, obviously not everyone's in a position to provide assistance. You're a small little woman or you're an older person, you're whatever. There's a lot of people who can't. But you or me, relatively able-bodied guys, depending on the circumstance, yeah, we could.
Right.
And I just took that as kind of a cultural moment that, the Calgary, I know, it is the expectation that an able-bodied man is going to step up and help someone being assaulted. But now our police are telling us, don't help someone as you see them with your own eyes being actively assaulted. It smacked a bit of when, the Toronto police said to leave your keys by the front door so that when someone breaks in, they don't come and shoot you.
Right.
I don't know. How do you respond to that?
I think the biggest challenge we're seeing is that don't be apathetic to the crime. Do what you can, right? And I think the idea that don't just walk past it, call 911, do something about it. But I think the challenge has been downtown, largely in part, guys like us do get involved, and then we get just as hurt as the rest because more of them
Or we get charged.
and then nobody's helping us. Well, I don't even know that it's a charging factor. It's the fact that, more of them are jumping in to compound the problem than are helping. And so are we making the situation worse or are we making it better? Because I feel the same as you. Like, there are times when you just want to jump in, but it's knowing the right circumstance. It's knowing the right intervention for the right circumstance that has to happen. I think the biggest thing we've got to do is, like, if you talk to the city council, for instance, they'll tell you that crime is down. We should feel safer. And I totally disagree. I think the problem we have is
safer right now.
Well, I don't either. And the problem we have is that it's not that crime is down, is that it's crime reporting is down because people are tired of reporting it and then nothing happens. And I think what the police are trying to say is you have to report it. We have to resource it according to the reports, and you have to get involved and make sure we call 911 when you see disorder happening.
But people are not going to report if nothing happens.
I agree. I think that is the challenge.
Just so the alley where I said, we got addicts behind our building here, right in the alley here. About this 2 years ago, I had my motorcycle parked there, and an addict came, pushed over my motorcycle just for.
I remember you telling me this story.
Yeah. I rode around, found him. I didn't intervene. I didn't do what my
brain wanted you to do.
Yeah, I restrained myself. I didn't do it. I got the cops. They arrested him. They charged him, immediately released him. He never showed up for court. And then they do nothing to even attempt to execute the warrant. And they'll pick him up and release him again. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And so I've had other cases of vandalism where now I don't want to have to spend a couple hours of my life talking to the police so that nothing happens.
Well, and that's how business owners in the core feel right now, right? I mean, largely in part, they go up front and there's disorder happening in front of the business and they say, please move along. Yeah, they might move along, but then the shop owner comes back the next morning and all the windows are broken out of the store, right? It's that type of thing. And it's that type of reason why people say, maybe I don't want to get involved. The challenge is there's more of us than them. And, our agenda here is to get tough on crime. And again, to do that, we need to talk about bail reform. We need to pilot more community courts. We need to get the criminals off the street, right? Because at the end of the day, these criminals are preying on people who fall into addiction and mental health challenges. These criminals are the ones causing social disorder on our streets. These criminals are causing people like you and me to have to look over our shoulder in the downtown, let alone our teenagers and our parents won't walk around or be on LRT right now because it's just not safe. That absolutely cannot be the norm going forward, and we're absolutely committed to making this a safer city.
So crime, that seems to be one of the absolute core functions of government at all levels, particularly municipal. Another one is just making sure that basic infrastructure works.
Correct.
And for, as I said, I'm in the county now, but I was living in a West End community when water mains or was it feeders? The feeders.
You never knew you had so many best friends calling to have a shower at your place.
Yeah. I never knew how much my friends stunk.
Yeah.
It was, so we were on water reduction, but I wasn't in the area that had no water. But I certainly had a hell of a commute for a very long time, driving through there every day. And it was just a reminder every day that basic crap doesn't work in this city.
And that the basics matter.
Yeah. We got a climate emergency that they pledged a theoretical amount of money on, that Calgary could have bought an aircraft carrier and put it in the Glen. We could have put it in the reservoir. And I think it would have been a better use of money. I mean, at least it's cool. We would have cool. Calgary's not an aircraft carrier. We can attack. Bam. I don't know. But we've got that huge emphasis on gender ideology, politics, just all this weird stuff that has nothing to do with making sure that the water runs, the streets are plowed, and that the parks are clean, and that the streets are safe.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of bring it back to these feeder mains. It's just simple stuff not getting done. The stuff I would expect my tax dollars to go towards. I don't know.
Our campaign is completely about getting back to basics. You've got to build the foundation first before you move forward. And, to me right now, like you, when the water stops running in a world-class city, when 40% of our roads have fallen into disrepair, when we talk a big game about climate and mobility, yet we don't shovel the walks for 9 months out of the year, that's a problem, right? And so it's about taking care of our infrastructure first and making sure that we are set to continue to grow. Because that is one of the bigger challenges behind the infrastructure debate, is that Calgary We're growing by 70,000 people a year. In order to keep up with that, we've got to maintain the basics, which means we've got to maintain the water, and we do have to maintain the roads, and we do have to take care of our parks, and we do have to do things like traffic synchronization, right? If we want to talk a big game about climate, how about just moving people from point A to point B in a timely manner, right? The last time we looked at traffic synchronization, there were 600,000 people less in Calgary. It's time to play catch up here on the basics so that all of us can live a better lifestyle without getting into the weeds about things that we can't control as a city.
So I want to touch on something that involves infrastructure and growth that is not under your jurisdiction, but you would have possibly some influence over.
Sure.
Immigration wasn't in most people's top 10 issues in Canada 2 years ago. Now it's number one for a ton of people, and it still ranks in the top 5 for a majority of Canadians. There's different parts to it. A society cannot digest and assimilate this number of people. No society has ever succeeded in doing it. We're not any different. We're clearly failing. We can't. It's putting huge stress on our infrastructure, like schools. We just had to build more schools because of it.
Infrastructure, affordability,
housing,
everything
through the roof. No one likes to say it, but it has an impact on crime. People who are not yet assimilated and integrated are going to be more likely to fall into it. It's uncomfortable, but it's a fact. Immigration is federal. The province is rattling its saber, at least, about taking provincial control over it in a similar way that Quebec has. Would you, if you're mayor, would you exert at least some kind of influence about trying to restrict or control the amount of newcomers in so much as you reasonably can? We're not going to build a wall around Calgary. That's not feasible. But what would you do on this issue? Because it's an aggravating issue on a bunch of these other things that we're talking.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think it's about tying job growth to immigration, right? I mean, I think it's about making sure that we manage growth in terms of the amount of people coming here, and I think that's where City Council has failed to build partnerships with both the provincial and federal government. I mean, when we have these national issues that are happening, and we are part of the fastest growing jurisdiction, to us, we need a better deal in Calgary because we see a lot of our dollars being spread across the country. I mean, nobody loves the fact that our transfer payments are going out east. How do we get more of those dollars back to make sure that we can manage growth in a different way? If this country is going to keep growing and we can tie that to job growth and we do want new economic possibilities to be happening, those are all good things, but you have to manage the process. And by way of not managing the process, we now get into affordability challenges, we get into housing challenges, we get into job challenges. And largely in part, I would tell you that the housing and affordability piece are self-inflicted at the city, right? Our challenge is when it takes 8 years to get a building out of the ground, well, you failed to meet both housing and your affordability commitments, right? You need to develop faster. You need to keep up with the pace of growth, and you need to move at the pace of business if you're going to be a city that continues to grow and achieve opportunity.
I'm going to ask, this one wasn't planned. I'm going to ask because I'm self-interested now that I'm in the county. The relationship between Calgary, Rocky View, Foothills, and then the small town, you got Airdrie, Cochrane, etc., Strathmore. It has at times been tense. I know there's the regional board, and some of the outlying areas feel it's a little unfairly weighted to Calgary, gives it effective veto over things. Obviously, Calgary should have the most weight; it's by far the biggest.
Sure,
but it's a tense relationship. Normally on issues of development, the tensions often, not always, but often being that the outlying areas are maybe seen as a bit more development friendly, and they're attracting development there that increases their tax base at the expense of Calgary, which thinks it should have gone there. I don't know. How would you manage the relationship with kind of the outlying municipalities, the two counties, Foothills, Rocky View, and then, the smaller towns?
Yeah, I think it's about shared economic prosperity, first of all. I think there's lots of things to go around, but let's be clear, my job is to keep tax base in the city. And if we're losing tax base in the city because of timing issues or the inability of the city to move at the pace of business, then that's a challenge we have to fix, right? I mean, there are lots of opportunities and ways for us to share regionally in terms of some of these projects. Prairie Gateway is a great example of all of those things coming. The challenge we have is that if I'm going to freeze taxes, the offset to that is I have to build tax base, right? Because we can't continue to erode the tax rate that we have. We have to build new tax base. And that's exactly what I plan to do. So will Calgary compete differently in terms of timing and opportunity? Absolutely, we will. But we will ensure that we work as regional partners to ensure that everybody can benefit.
Well, I think that segues nicely to blanket rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons I decided to leave the city.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few.
I think there's a few of those
we've talked about a few of them.
Yeah.
But blanket rezoning, what it's trying to achieve, it's a difference between the means and the ends, I guess. Okay, we're trying to build more units for more people to live here, should theoretically bring down some housing prices.
Right.
But I see it was violating the property rights of people who bought properties on an assumption it's zoned this way, and that's the nature of the community. That's what I bought. You're now changing the rules of the game. That's a violation of people's property rights. You said you're going to get rid of blanket rezoning. What would you see as, and there's a constant tension, I guess, between the need to develop and NIMBYs.
Yep.
I admit, now that I'm out of the country, I'm a little bit of, I try to be self-aware. I'm a little bit NIMBY. I like my privacy and being alone.
Sure.
That's what I want. That's what I went for.
But that's not a bad thing, by the way.
No,
I mean,
at least I'm self-aware. I'm a bit of a newbie now. Yeah, most people just never admit to it.
That's right.
I am. But when I was living in a suburban house, that was the nature of the community. I don't want an eightplex next door. It would totally change the the nature of the neighborhood. But at the same time, there probably is a place for it in some communities.
Sure.
I don't know what everyone says. Yes, but just not in mine. Put it in that one over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. How do you balance the need to respect the property rights of those there, the nature of the communities that people bought into when they bought their homes, but also the legitimate need for growth, development, so that we can have more affordable housing?
Yeah, and again, a problem that didn't need to get created. Nobody campaigned on this last election, right? So,
and they just did it.
Let's start with one of the greatest things I think about Calgary is the diversity of our communities. I don't want our communities to look the same because I actually value the idea of, we can go for dinner in Kensington and have a very different experience than perhaps going to the Northeast for dinner. We don't need to look the same. Number two, we were told this was about density. We were told this was about affordability. When the average row house is starting at north of $700,000, that's not affordable to most people, right? When we're talking about 70,000 people, as we just discussed, moving to Calgary every year, you're not keeping up with density by building 4 units at a time. So I would much rather work with communities on a couple of different things. Number one, we roll back the blanket rezoning, go back to the program we had before, because it actually worked when we put communities in charge of their development. Giving them a bigger voice in development is key here. And I'll give you an example of where it worked for me as a former city councillor. On the west side, I put in 3 new districts at Springbank Hill, West District, and the project down at Winsport. All of those communities have diversity of products. They have parks, they have amenities, they have affordability built in. They will add 55,000 residents to the west side. We built 3 new communities within existing communities. That's how you build density, right? Work with community to talk about where does the density make sense? How do we add value and character to communities rather than erode it? The last thing I ever want to see, and it pains you to see this going on in the city, where citizens are using their last dollar to sue the city over parking issues. To me, that's silly. It should never happen. And, when we talk about council's discretion in this, we've always talked about the idea that if you're going to develop, there should be tree canopy. There should be rules. There should be on-site parking for everybody who is developing a lot. And on the parking thing, for instance, now it's gone from 1 unit, for 1 parking stall on a lot to 1 unit and half a parking stall on a lot. Well, I don't know anybody who owns half a car, but I'll tell you it's wrong, right? And it's wrong from the sense that neighbors should never be fighting each other over concerns of parking.
Yeah. I think the last question will be around taxes. Geez, that shows you just how the top issues for me have changed over here. My last question is about taxes,
But that's the case of the city, right? I mean, issues are very different 4 years later.
It's still a big one. Another reason I left, lower taxes out of the county.
Yeah.
Taxes are pretty nuts right now. I mean, they're not as high as in some other major cities. Sure, those are off the charts high.
Yeah.
So, Calgary Mayor and Council's excuses for it are, well, it's not as high as Toronto or Vancouver. Well, yeah, it's like comparing your freedom to North Korea.
Yeah.
Like, you're really setting a benchmark that you can't lose on.
Yeah.
All right. You've promised a 4-year tax freeze. Of course, you need to get council on side for that,
Sure.
but that's your platform. The city's growing like mad. Like immigration has, despite the federal government's promises, is not really slowing down. It's still just coming. We don't even know how many now.
Yeah.
But easier said than done. What are kind of the beyond just kind of the bullet points? Well, restraining spending, etc. Give me your top 3 specific things you would do to be able to keep taxes down.
Yeah,
Very specific.
And let's talk about the context here, because I think it's important, right? The number one issue for people right now is affordability. And so what is the city going to do their part to make life more affordable for people? Well, taxes are the biggest thing that we have, right? At a point where we're seeing more and more vacancy happen and more consolidation, frankly, driving that vacancy in the downtown core, we can't continue to push the costs out to other small businesses across our city. So number one, those small businesses, they're at a breaking point.
So you're sorry to interrupt. Is that for residential and business?
Yes. Yeah, because here's the point.
Everybody just dumps it onto business to keep residential.
Well, and that's what we can't keep doing, right?
Yeah.
We're now at a ratio of, non-residential to residential. I think it's something like 4.65 to 1 at 5%, So think of it in terms of like $1 to $5. At $5, the province takes over taxation because we failed to manage it, right?
Yeah.
And so, to me, looking at a tax freeze and then how we're going to offset that is a big issue. But it gets back to focusing on core services, focus on the things that Calgarians have asked, focus on public safety, affordability, infrastructure. So to me, there's a couple things to do here. Number one, in the first half of this year, we had a $220 million surplus, right? The city should have had better predictability on this. And I would fire any analyst who didn't calculate this correctly, right? That's a 12% property tax reduction. So in a year when we had an 8.9% increase, literally they could have done nothing and still been ahead of the game, right? So that tells me that we could have budgeted accordingly here and not had a tax increase this year. Going forward, I'm the only one saying 4-year tax freeze. They're saying, well, we're going to increase taxes by 5.5% next year. When we know affordability matters to more people than not.
By that, do you mean the Sharp and Hursley?
The current city council.
Okay, that's great. Say council. Okay.
That we will have a 5.5% property tax increase. Again, because we haven't got budgets in line. So if we look at a couple of things like, the $220 million surplus, if we look at saying, I'm freezing new spending on bike lanes, right? So $45 million in next year's budget is allocated to new bike lanes.
So no new bike lanes?
No new bike lanes.
Okay.
This is absolutely the priority.
All right, so that's what I'm looking for. Specifics. I know they're not going to all add up to one, but I'm just looking for
but they
three
do,
big
right?
specifics.
So
I
you
think
look at
three don't add.
Okay, so number one, you manage your reserves differently, right? We'll manage our asset class better. We reduce or improve our risk profiling so that we can actually, an example would be, do we need to buy a new truck this year or can we push that off 2 years type of thing, right? We're going to look at how we grow tax base, which is absolutely part of an industrial land strategy, as well as a development strategy to keep more dollars right here within the city of Calgary. Grow our revenue base so that we can stop eroding the tax rate is really the 3 big focuses of how we're going to do that.
I guess allow me to rephrase because those are important measures. But I'm looking for things like, no new bike lanes. So that's a cost saving.
So
measure.
So if you think about it, cost savings,
more of those.
But it's also about reallocation of funding onto the things that matter to Calgarians, right? Which is why we're saying we can freeze our taxes.
Water feeders, no one's going to argue with that.
Right. Public safety, right? People are concerned with a lack of transit options. So all of these things are going to matter. But if you look at the specifics, you've got, again, reserves, manage them differently. And when you have a surplus, apply it to tax base. When you have things like $45 million next year for bike lanes, reallocate that. That's not an important spend right now. And Calgarians have told us that's not an important spend right now. And things like climate, right? Are we going to continue to spend money in areas of climate that are really the responsibility of the federal government, not the responsibility of the city of Calgary?
I'm starting to think that bike lane people might be the equivalent of like the dairy farm lobby. Like, no one wants this, but it still happens with our tax dollars every year, and we can't seem to defeat it.
But I think where people have gotten to on that subject, though, is reasonability, right? So where and when we have bike lanes that are negatively impacting businesses and parking, fine, let's remove them. We can do better, right? And all we're saying is let's not do anything new until we further understand the usability of the program. Right?
We got to convince them to actually ride on the bike lanes, not on the road right beside the bike lanes.
That is a big problem.
I'm not sure how we do that one, but that'll be maybe your job.
A challenge for another day.
Well, Jeff, Mr. Davison, thank you very much for coming in.
Appreciate you.
And sharing some of your time, and good luck on Election Day.
Thank you very much.
All right. That's Calgary mayoral candidate, Jeff Davison. Election day is October 20th, I believe. That's a Monday. That's a Monday. Coming right up, not just in Calgary, but every municipality across Alberta. If you're not sure about who to vote for, my general rule of thumb is look online about who the unions have endorsed and just vote for someone else. That's how I always vote for school board. All right, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.